Welcome again to the first Wednesday webinar series, Why Study Overseas. It's great to have everyone here. We'll introduce ourselves real quick. Jason, if you want to go.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. It's really exciting to see the momentum build for international. So we're happy to be here, happy that you've taken the time out to join us. But my name is Jason Bai. I'm the Senior International Officer with the University of Glasgow. I'm based in Washington, DC.
Go next. Hi everyone, my name's Lea-Anne Allen. I represent Macquarie University, which is in Sydney, Australia. I'm based in California and I look after the US and Canada for the university.
Thanks, and my name is Jim Pierson. I'm the Senior Admissions Officer for North and South America with the University College Dublin, and I'm based in Chicago, Illinois, and the three of us are all co-presidents of AIRR-NA, which is a funny way of saying that we all help equally in promoting AIRR-NA and international education and bringing this group of people together. So just in case you don't know what AIRR-NA is, if you've ever heard of any of the other regional rep organizations around the country, like RAC in California or CAR in Chicago, we're a regional group that represents international universities with representatives based in North America. So the big benefit of working with us is that all the reps you're going to be talking to are only a time zone or two away from you at max in helping you in searching for opportunities abroad, learning about universities overseas. And we're all here in North America. We work primarily with North American students to help them get to another country to learn. And we're a growing group. We have 21 universities that are all members from 9 different countries and 35 different representatives based across the country. This slide is only slightly out of date as we had a new university join today. So we're up to 10 countries and 22 universities with 39 reps. So it's a big deal to have this diverse a group of organizations that are here to work with North American students, families, counselors, and help you all learn about going overseas. We do offer a lot in addition to these kind of webinars and promoting options for international education. We can do a lot for you. We can connect you with individual admissions counselors if you're really curious about University of British Columbia or the American University Paris. We can connect you with those reps that work in country and you can start asking questions about how to apply. If you're a counselor, if you work in a school or a private counseling organization, we can help do sessions for you, for people you work with, for your students, to help them learn about international education. And then if you're a student or a family looking for opportunities abroad, we can help start at the very top of what's it like, what's it mean, and how do I do it, down to getting you to the university you want to study at. And just to promote, a lot of you have already signed up for our future webinars, but here are the ones that are coming up later. This one tonight is a little bit more general about why to go abroad and what people, kind of misconceive studying abroad for a degree is. But later on, we'll get more specific. We'll have opportunities to learn about the different countries represented in AIRR-NA. So like Study Down Under, if you want to go to Australia and New Zealand, you can learn about that there. And all the other webinars that are available on our website, you can register for those as well. So all great learning opportunities. So then this session, what we're talking about in the webinar here is why go overseas? What's the point? Why do I do it? And then we'll talk about some common myths, some misconceptions, things that people ask us a lot or frequently think that about going abroad for a degree that aren't really true. But I mean, the benefits, we think we've been doing it for a long time, are just apparent, but it's good to spell them out and see what some of the benefits are generally. And I think one of the big benefits of going abroad is that you get an education that's international in its very nature. And everything is international now. Whether you want to go into business or literature, or broadcast TV, or biology, you're going to be working with people across country borders. And especially now with people working from home and those distinctions of where you work not being as important, you're going to need that kind of international cultural competency. And you get that because you'll spend 3 or 4 years doing a degree in another country and really experiencing it for yourself for a long time.
And it's also, I'll jump in really quickly, it's also something so simple as my experience at a US university where how do you speak about conflict in the Middle East without students from the Middle East? It's a very one-sided conversation when you don't have that cross-cultural perspective in your classroom. And at least from the US's perspective, it's quite difficult for students to get all the way to the US. We're quite isolated where we are. And so a lot of the other international options to get to the US, you just have an easier draw of students from all over the world strictly because it's easier to get to.
I think that's very true. I've personally studied in 5 countries, so I've been very lucky to sort of had the ability to study around the world. And it's amazing how much money you can get from scholarship organisations as well. I'd never left Australia before. I went for the first time in high school to Japan for a year, and it wasn't something that my family had ever done. So even though it sounds so scary, it's definitely doable. And one of my favourite anecdotes is a student who graduated from Macquarie with a Bachelor of Arts, and he actually applied for a job at Moody Analytics in New York, which is a multinational financial firm, and he had to go through 5 stages of interviews. And he said at least 30 to 40% of every stage was just about his experience in Australia. And to be able to speak so confidently about such an experience is really what won him the job at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. And it's amazing the opportunities you'll get doing an international degree, and how often it gets brought up in conversation, in regular conversation, in interviews, and in the workplace. So it's a really great opportunity. And then before you even get to that part, that personal growth that's attested to in the quote on this slide, I mean, it really teaches you what you're capable of. And if you can move to a new country, work in a new culture, and really experience an international degree, you can do anything. Because if you can do that, what else can't you do? So those are some of the benefits real quick of why you should be considering this, and you're here, so you're probably thinking about it now or thinking about students that it'd be a good fit for. But there's a lot of misconceptions out there, so we'll jump into them and what they are and why they're a little off base. So one of the things we hear a lot is that my degree won't be recognized at the same level of education as it is in the US. I mean, generally, when I'm sitting at a college fair or a student emails me, they're like, is this a real degree? Is this a thing that I can use? And every time I have to re-explain it to them, but it's a brand new system that people don't really know. But the short answer is yes, it's a real degree. Yes, it will be recognized. You can use it. If you go to if you go to any of the universities represented in AIRR-NA, or pretty much any international university that's like a public university that's accredited by the country it's in, like especially European or Australia, New Zealand, a whole bunch of countries, like all their education systems are at a par, if not better than the US education system. So it'll be a degree that you can use, a bachelor's of arts, bachelor of science, or whatever it might be, that you can use when you come back home to the States or Canada if you go abroad somewhere else. So you will be able to use it. You can check accreditation when you're going abroad. And if you have questions about accreditation or what it's useful for, contacting AIRR-NA or reaching out to one of us is something we'd be happy to talk through with you and figure out what it's like. But it is a bit different. I think beyond the fact that it is a real degree, that you can use it, there are benefits to doing this kind of degree over staying in the States that will help you. So part of it is there's a degree of specialization and focus that you get in a lot of international degrees you don't get in US programs, because a lot of international universities don't have general education requirements. So if you study biology at a European university, for example, you'll study nothing but biology the whole time. You get options to maybe like take a class or two in something else, but you can spend the whole time doing nothing but that subject, which means you go really deeply, really quickly into your subject. You go straight into it, and all you have to do is that subject. So you end up learning a lot about it, and you get that kind of independent study and critical thinking through these kind of degrees a lot. And then there was QS is a international education company that ranks and looks at universities and education systems. And they did a global employer survey and found that out of 10,000 companies they talked to, more than 80% would have actively sought out graduates who studied abroad. And that can be just studying abroad for a semester, and you stand out even more if you study abroad for a full degree program. And then just generally about academics, like it's a degree you can use, and there's the same and more options abroad than what you'd be able to find in the States. So you can do everything from agriculture to zoology. You can do a bachelor's in English or bio or engineering, but you can also do programs that you can't do in the States, like undergraduate entry law or medicine or veterinary medicine, which can be very competitive to get into, but a great degree option and something that you can't find here. So there's a lot available for you if you go abroad, and it will get you to the same place you want to go, and maybe a better or different place than if you stayed in the States for your degree. And there's a lot more. Every country is different, and that's why we hope you'll come to the Wednesday webinars for the different country systems to learn how they differ from each other and differ from the States and Canada. But they can be 3 or 4 years. They can be more flexible or less flexible, kind of depending what education system you find yourself in. And like I said, there are a lot of undergraduate degree programs that you can do abroad, like going straight into a 6-year medicine program and graduating in 6 years as a doctor, instead of doing the 4 years plus 4 years that you do in the US. So there's a lot available for you to be able to explore and do something different outside of the States.
And myth number 2 of something that we are very constantly asked when we're on the stand visiting, hopefully visiting you guys at college fairs and talking to your students, is that I won't get any work experience or find a job after graduation. I think everybody's worried about finding that employment opportunity while you're there. And Jim, can you switch to the next slide? Perfect, thank you. So while you're abroad, your student visa does allow students to have a job while they are abroad. So they can hold down an internship, they can grab a part-time job, either at a coffee shop or something that's more relevant to their degree while they're actually a student overseas. Just a couple of examples of work placement opportunities that are built into the degree. You can do that, that are built into the degree, but then once you graduate, Australia has the PACE, professional and community engagement opportunities for students when they're done. The UK has the student visa extension program, the post-study work visa. If you're a graduate of a UK university, you're allowed to stay in the UK for up to 2 years to work with no restrictions on what kind of income that you have to have or what kind of visa that you're allowed to be on. Ireland has the graduate stay-back visa to allow students to stay and get that work experience in the country that they've just graduated university from. And then globalization, it just means that internationalizing increases your employability. So I can take it, I'm based in Washington, DC. I also grew up here, and I started my university career in the DC area. So I feel like I can knock it for a little bit, but it's something quite simple where US universities typically have a lot of strong partnerships with employers, and those are fantastic relationships and certainly one pathway for students to reach employment when they finish graduating. But the issue that myself and a couple of my friends had is you are applying to a job or an internship through a connection through a program with up to 150 to 200 other applicants from the exact same program, being taught by the exact same professors from the university that this employer is very familiar with. So your interviews, when you are 1 out of 200 from the exact same program, it's somehow you have to differentiate how your skills are different to these 200 other applicants for the same job that you're going for. However, when you have an international degree, the simple fact is that employers don't know what immediately to do with it. And it doesn't necessarily guarantee you the job, but what it does guarantee is your foot in the door. Because the conversation that you have with an international degree, it's not, how are you somehow different from all of these other students with very similar qualifications? It's, how did you end up in the country that you studied in? Most curriculum overseas is research and project-based instead of continuous assessment. So usually students are graduating with an entire academic body of work, and especially from undergrad, where those undergraduate research opportunities within the US are limited and very competitive. Having that research experience on a degree in their field of study is invaluable. So the conversation with employers, it goes from, how did you end up in another country, to tell me about this research project that you've been a part of. And it's not really about how you working on a group project from the same program with a stack of other applicants are somehow different. So your conversation is a completely unique one, and it's something that makes you memorable. So it doesn't guarantee that you get the job, but it gets your foot in the door, and it's something that the employer is going to remember about the Italian kid, the Canadian kid, the kid who studied abroad. And then we do have resources to help assist in job placement for students while they're there. So there's career support services, just like there is in the US universities, and most of these offices have a running list of companies and corporations that after a student completes something like a 2-year post-study work visa in the UK, they can use this list and those resources to look at companies that are already on those international government sponsor lists to be able to ultimately sponsor more permanently a worker when they've graduated. We also have these particular universities in AIRR-NA have extensive alumni networks, both physical and virtual, when it'll be safe to meet in public again. So there are so many resources that are similar, if not better than US universities for your students. And then myth number 3, it costs too much and there's no financial aid to help study. So if you look at the cost of university study abroad, there are so many ways that you can cut corners for the fees. So application fees are typically much cheaper. For the UK, for instance, there's one application fee for all of their options. Other university systems, the application is completely free. So you save quite a bit of money from these poor students that are paying so much money to send in their 10 to 15 college applications, and they spend their entire month's worth of after-school paycheck in order to do so. So you save a little bit of money with the application fees, but also the tuition is comparable to or lower than many similarly ranked US institutions, particularly if your students are already considering out of state. In-state tuition can be quite competitive, can give international students or international institutions a run for our money. However, if students are already considering out-of-state options, international programs are typically a fraction of the cost, up to about a quarter of the cost. And another thing is that international universities typically don't control the costs of living for students on campus. So there's typically no meal plan that they have to be a part of. A lot of times students don't buy their books abroad. There's no kind of central control over how much they're going to spend on food, how much they're going to spend on housing. So students have a lot more control of their budget. If any of your students are planning on taking out student loans, it's not the most attractive option, but every little bit of help counts in the current climate. So all the universities in AIRR-NA are currently FAFSA registered. So it transfers, the FAFSA application transfers to universities just like it would with a US university. And then the GI Bill is also recognized for international study. So if anybody has access to the GI Bill, you can absolutely use that. Any kind of student loans from FAFSA. Private loans are also available. The students just have to make sure that the private loan provider can send money outside of the US. That's the only kind of caveat. Cheaper healthcare, the US is working its way. We're trying to get there. We're just not quite on the ship yet, but most other countries in the world have some kind of universal healthcare, and those costs are much cheaper than what they would be paying to have either private health insurance or to be a part of university insurance once they're on campus as well. And there are usually scholarships for international students from universities. However, these are merit-based scholarships very typically. If you take a country like Scotland, for instance, Scottish students go to school in Scotland for free. So the idea of a need-based scholarship it's not quite as common. They can exist, but typically all the scholarships will be merit-based. So if you have students that have achieved pretty highly particularly in their subject that they want to study, usually there's some scholarship money to help them. And then we've got a slide on cost comparisons, just a couple of examples. We couldn't fill out the entire map, but just to give you an idea of tuition fees, and these are tuition and costs of living. So we've got UBC starting it out over on the West Coast in Vancouver, 38 grand US dollars. And if you're looking at out-of-state options, 38,000 is actually a nice price point to compare it to when you're looking at the cost of out-of-state institutions. We've got UCD over in Ireland at 37. Glasgow is a little bit cheaper, up in Scotland at 36. And even to go all the way to Australia, you're looking at $40,000, which is usually comparable to similarly ranked US institutions, especially with out-of-state tuition. And then just a couple of other cost considerations. If their program, a lot of European programs are 3 years of study instead of 4 years. So you're obviously going to save a lot of money not having that extra 4th year. At the moment, the US dollar is pretty weak against international currencies. So students get a little bit of a boost as far as the exchange rate goes at the moment. So there's really no better time minus COVID. So once it's safe, there's no better time as far as the financial situation with the US to study abroad, for sure. Citizenship and residency, so make sure to, if any students have a dual citizenship or an extra passport somewhere and they're looking at home fees, if they are a resident of another country, there are options for home-based fees instead of international tuition fees, and all of the costs that we've shown have been international tuition fees. So home fees, like Scotland, for instance, are much cheaper than international fees. And then professional degrees are available direct entry from high school in most international institutions. So if you have students that are looking for vet med or MBA programs, law programs, medicine, they are direct entry from high school. Medicine is always tricky to come back into the US. The AMA is not going to recognize medical degrees, but they can go abroad for that pre-med to qualify for US med schools if they want to come back in the US. But you can check out the AMBA for business degree accreditation. You can check out the AVMA for vet med degree accreditation. You'll find that there are so many more international universities being accredited by US bodies than ever before. So there's a lot of mobility involved, even with those professional degrees.
Okay, so over to our fourth and final myth. Overseas universities don't offer the same resources. I can't have the true college experience. This is not true. I think it's fair to say that students from all over the world, whether they're Australian or Scottish or French or German, want to have the same university experience as you do. So the campuses are set up very similarly to what you would expect from a US campus as well. So we have clubs and associations and accommodation on campus and a lot of support available as well. I think the biggest difference is we don't have Greek life off campus or out of the United States, I should say. We just have Greek students enjoying life on campus. Students can join lots of different clubs and associations, as I was saying, and most universities around the world will have an orientation week or a freshman week or an O week. There's so many different ways to sort of explain that 1 week prior to the university starting. And that's when you really get to know what's available on campus. There's lots of campus tours, and that's when you can really join the clubs and associations. I certainly recommend joining as many as possible in the first couple of weeks and get to know different people and make your community that way. One of the biggest differences, however, is accommodation. So a lot of students, when they are studying outside of the United States, often have their own bedroom and sometimes also their own bathroom. I can say Australians certainly find it strange that Americans share bedrooms while in college. Another big thing is the opportunity to travel. As I said before, I've studied in 5 countries and I try and encourage students to beat me and make it 6 or 7 countries because you really have no idea how many opportunities are out there. So try and grab them all. You can do a semester abroad or full year abroad, or even a summer or a winter. And now, of course, faculty-led travel is happening more and more around the world as well. You could certainly look at coming back to the US and doing a semester exchange or study abroad if you want to have that sort of US experience. But also you can certainly do your degree overseas. If it's a 3-year degree, come back to the US and do your master's. So you're getting both that international and US experience, saving money and probably time in the meantime. Another option you could do is a 3-year degree in Australia and then go back to the UK and do a 1-year master's program. And then you're certainly well ahead of your peers that have stayed in the US, especially at schools where it's really hard to graduate within 4 years and it's more likely to graduate in 5 or 6 years. Support offices as well are huge for students. I know personally at Macquarie, we have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week support service of students, and that is very common at many universities around the world. So if you're feeling a bit homesick and you just want to have a chat to someone, or if you've been on a night out and you lost your wallet and you just need to borrow $50, the support services that are there at other universities across the world, as you would find in the United States. I think one of the biggest differences between campuses in the United States and around the world is they're probably much more independent elsewhere. As a student, you would have to be, I should say. You won't be chased up if you don't submit your essays or your assignments on time. Unlike probably in a lot of schools in the US, you'll have much more support from the academics. And by support, I mean, you can certainly go in and chat to them at all times, but they believe you're independent enough to submit as an assignment on time. So definitely keep that in mind as well. You have to be self-motivated to thrive at schools outside of the United States. Moving on to the next one is just some photos of students from each of our universities just enjoying life on campus. I think one really fun thing for students who are going overseas is to try a different sport, try one that you've never heard of before. I think for a lot of US students, trying cricket in Australia or the UK or even netball. Australian football is another one that's increasingly huge. And I know Gaelic football, the Irish sport, is increasingly common in America. So I always joke for students, if you ever want to be an Olympian, make sure you try a sport that doesn't yet exist in America, and you could certainly try and bring it home. Moving on to the application process. Now, this is a little challenging sort of to try and encapsulate the whole world because it is so different from country to country and also from school to school within each country. For Canada, it's generally speaking an individual application to the university's online portal, although they do sometimes have provincial systems, but it does vary by state and also where you're from as well. In Australia, we are generally direct and online. Students can apply anytime in their senior year, and often they'll get a response from the university within 2 to 3 weeks. So that can be very helpful when you're sort of going into your senior year and wondering where and what you're going to study. You can certainly get a lot of the applications done early at schools outside of the United States. A lot of schools are also test optional at the moment during COVID, and some international schools have taken that on, but it is a little more challenging for international schools to become test optional. So it's well worth checking directly with each of the universities that you're looking at to see if you need to take the SAT or ACT now. But we certainly do just very much look at a student's academic merit. So we'll look at your GPA and your test scores. I don't think any universities outside of the US actually require a personal statement or a recommendation letter. Having said that, UCAS often does. So they're their own world in the UK. So look at that certainly because they may require the personal statement, but it is different to what you would expect from US schools. As I was saying with tests.
Lea-Anne, when are we doing the UCAS webinar? What date is that?
I can tell you what that is. It is November 4th.
There we are. Perfect. Yeah, so if anybody's got questions on UK UCAS, they're going to get their own webinar in the series. So pop in November and we'll go through all your questions. Awesome.
Yeah, perfect. Interviews are very uncommon as well for schools outside of the US, unless you're applying for a professional program like medicine or dentistry, they potentially would. But generally speaking, international universities very much care about your academic grade. So do keep that in mind. Sorry, Jim, I was confusing you there. So how do you find more information? So definitely recommend going to the AIRR-NA website if you haven't been there already. That's where you find a list of universities that have representatives in the United States, such as us. You can also go to country level organisations. So have a look at Education in Ireland, the British Council, or Study in Australia. They can be really great resources if you're thinking you might want to go to that country and maybe you want to do marine sciences, but you don't know which school is the best. Check that out, as well as the NACAT Guide for International University Admissions. That was actually released just yesterday. They've updated it for a 2020 version. So that's really helpful in sort of getting a better idea of how to apply to each of the individual universities, and also understanding the jargon that we all use, because it can be quite different. As I think we mentioned before, students can use the federal, the FAFSA aid when studying outside the United States. And there's actually a link there that shows the 200 schools outside of the US where students can use FAFSA to help support their studies financially. So lots of great resources available for you guys. I think that's, yeah, sums it up. We did that quite quickly for you. These are our contact details. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and of course sign up for the other webinars. But for now, we're all yours. Any questions, anything we didn't answer for you, or anything you'd like to find out more about?
Yeah, and while we wait for the questions to roll in, I mean, you heard us say a dozen times that it depends on which country or which university you go to, and that's why it's great to have an organization like AIRR-NA. So you can go to the contact page there, and you can send a message to the whole group, and different universities will get back to you. And if you go to our member directory, each member page has an explanation of the university, their top programs, their costs and scholarships and applications. And we also put an update for each university on how they've adjusted to COVID-19 and how it might differ for applications and testing and student experience and all that. So you can find that information on the website there. So yeah, there's a lot of resources available. If you have questions about any of this, let us know, and we'll host our presentation on our website. It'll be up in another day or two, probably, so you can get those links instead of having to write them down real quickly. So we did get a question from a few different people. The first question we got is if we know any good schools for business, maybe in the UK specifically, but in general, but good schools for business studies that might be out there that we can recommend?
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in. To be a little bit selfish, Glasgow has a great MBA program, and it's triple accredited. So it's credited in the UK, in Europe, and in the US. So students can graduate on a Friday, come back to the US if they want, and practice on a Monday. And it's deemed equivalent by the AMBA. Other schools that have great business schools, King's College London, if your student is looking for London, has a great business school. Who else has an MBA? UCL is another fantastic option. University of Bristol has a nice MBA option. Swansea University in Wales. So you can have a full range of stuff. Those are the ones off the top of my head. But if you want to pop in your email to the AIRR-NA website, I can surely introduce you to a lot of the other schools that have MBA programs in the UK.
Yeah, that's great. And then we did get a question about how if schools will be test optional for incoming classes, either for 2021 or 22 or further. And I can say that there are some universities that will be test optional either for a year or two, depending on how things change. There are some that are switching to test optional going forward, and there are some that have always been test optional. So something we didn't really get to mention much here, but there will be a specific webinar on it in October, is American Universities Abroad. So this is like in our membership, American University of Paris, Franklin University in Switzerland, or the American College of Greece. Those are American style universities and colleges accredited in the States, but based somewhere else. So you get a very American style education, but you get to do it in Paris or, you know, on a lake in Switzerland. So it's a pretty nice setup, and those schools have always been test optional. So there are opportunities to go abroad in test optional places or universities, regardless of what's available. We did say, and it is true, that most schools will look more at your academics than other things, but even our schools are being more flexible this year than we would have been in the past, because obviously it's a lot harder to find a chance to sit for the SAT or ACT, and a bit of a different environment for academics and testing. We had another question about studying music overseas, and if there might be auditions for some students wanting to study music abroad, or any other information we have to share about doing a music program.
I don't, and Macquarie doesn't have it, but Jason, does Glasgow?
Yeah, Glasgow offers music. It's a little bit confusing because of the grading systems involved with the instrument playing are a little bit different in the US than to Europe, for example. So students from the US will typically have to send in a video of a certain length of them playing whatever instrument it is that they're looking to specialize in to meet the criteria. Usually we're looking for a grade 5 equivalency, a European grade 5. There's not quite the same. My understanding is that there's not quite the same equivalency measurements in the US. So a lot of schools for US students will just have them submit almost like a portfolio of their music ability with an interview.
Yeah, and I'll say, you know, for example, like UCD has a music program, but you don't have an audition at all to join it, because you can do it and focus on performance, or do it to focus on theory or scholarship or education. So you could join the program and not necessarily be doing it to do performance. So it'll vary depending if you're looking for like a music conservatory, which do exist in Europe as they do in the States, whereas that would be more performance based, and there would be some kind of audition, probably virtual. Usually most schools wouldn't expect you to attend in person to these kind of things if they have an audition. So you could record a video and post it on YouTube or something. But a lot of them will have options to do something like music or architecture without an audition or portfolio or something like that.
And typically the auditions will be live. So there will be a recorded component where students can submit something that they've recorded themselves, but the interview will be live within like a proctor to make sure that that the actual assessment is happening in real time.
Great.
I can answer that question about, oh, sorry, physical therapy just came through. Quite a few schools overseas do have physical therapy. Be careful that you are applying for a doctor of physiotherapy, because that comes back to the United States as opposed to a master of physiotherapy that you can find in some countries. But Macquarie certainly has one. I think, does UCD as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And their question too is asking about, you know, doing a physio or kinesiology major, but being close to a D1 school, so you get that exposure to sports and having that experience. But I think Lea-Anne kind of talked about, like, you can get involved in sports and you can do all that in international schools. It's very different. Like, there's nothing like the NCAA outside of the States, but you can get involved. And even like UCD has a physio program, and instead of working with like their D1 sports team, they work with a professional rugby team that's based in Dublin. So you still, in rugby, obviously needs a lot of physical therapy. So you do get a lot of exposure in the same opportunities. It won't be the same way as doing for like a, Big Ten football team or something, but you'll still get opportunities to do those kind of hands-on experience in something like physio. But that is definitely something worth asking the university itself, like what kind of physical or hands-on experiential component they have to the program. Great. And then we got a couple other questions about subject-specific recommendations. So someone asking for computer science and another person asking for forestry, wildlife biology, zoology, something in that area.
Yeah. Well, I know for forestry, wildlife biology, zoology, Glasgow is a particularly great option. They have the top-ranked vet med program in the UK, and so because of that reputation with vet med, there are so many adjacent degrees, particularly zoology, that are really top notch. Environmental science at Glasgow is also great. It's hosted in Dundee on a satellite campus, so students are really getting out there. They do a lot of work with geography, with the geography department. They're doing a lot of field research involved, so there's plenty of opportunities. Another university for marine biology would be Swansea University in the UK. The university is, I would say like as far as if ranking is important, Swansea is about middle of the road. They're kind of like in the upper third of UK universities. Globally, they're kind of like ranked around 400 or so, but their marine biology program is top notch. They are one of the universities, I think it's like the third closest to the beach, which they have so much access to things. So if anybody needs any more specific recommendations, I think the three of us could probably give examples within our immediate countries that we work.
I was going to say, not being biased, but definitely look at Australia for marine biology. Sure. We've got the Great Barrier Reef.
Yeah. An island definitely helps, and as close to the ocean as you can get for those kind of opportunities. But definitely something to look at our website for as well. All the universities there have their top 5 undergrad and grad programs listed that they'd kind of advertise, but then beyond that, you can look more in depth, and then you can message the AIRR-NA members and ask for, their options for marine biology, say, and they'll be able to get back to you. I think for computer science, someone asked just real quick, there are a lot of opportunities for computer science. So many places out there will have a great degree for you. You don't have to do a degree in near Silicon Valley to get a good computer science education. You can do that pretty much anywhere. There's great opportunities across Europe and in Australia, and especially if you go to schools in China, Japan, South Korea, there's a lot of great opportunities there. So it's definitely something worth exploring beyond just the US, especially, and something that I talk with students a lot, like we said before, there's usually no gen ed requirements outside of the States. So I'm guessing if you're looking for computer science, you don't want to do 2 years of history and speech and English lit and all these other courses you have to do at the US school. So you can do 3 or 4 years of nothing but computer science. So wherever you go, you're going to get a better education in computer science than I think you get in the States, because you'll spend a lot more time focusing on just that. Yeah, so that was a lot. We packed a ton into just over 40 minutes. So I think we'll sign off for now, but we'll post this and send it out. And like we said, we're open for any questions, any help we can give. We're here, and very grateful for you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Hope to be in touch soon.